Hello everyone, and welcome to a new episode of Gaming in the Wild, a video games podcast about games from the artistic, creative side of the tracks, from indie to AAA. My name's John, I'm your host, and this week in Reykjavik, winter is here. We had our first snow, so I went out for a walk in the snow. The days are getting short, so we have to grab the daylight when we can. So winter is here, it's dark, it's getting cold, and it's a good time of the year to play video games for sure. Maybe that's part of why video games are so popular here in Iceland as a pastime, is because we have a lot of time in the winter to play games, and that's what I've been doing. It's been an interesting week. I got a few ports through to try, games that I've tried on other systems that are coming out on a Switch or on PlayStation from wherever they were originally. So I've got a few of those to talk about. I know that Death's Door was a big one this year. It came out only on the Xbox, and I know that a lot of people, including people that don't have an Xbox, were quite curious to try this game, and now they're going to get their chance because it's coming out on everything else. A Short Hike finally came out on PlayStation, so for anyone who's been waiting for that one, that is now here for PlayStation players. And The Wild at Heart came out as well on several other platforms than the Xbox. It's on Switch, and I've been trying it out on Switch. So those are three games that I think are really quite special ones. And I'm happy to report that the new versions of them, the ports are all really great, actually. Death's Door is one that I had worried a little bit about on Switch, even though as I was playing it, I was thinking this game really does belong on the Switch. There's something about a top-down sort of Metroidvania-style game that just really fits on a handheld. It's like the old Zelda-style games. But Death's Door is fully rendered in 3D, despite the fact that a lot of those games aren't. So the perspective will sometimes shift in Death's Door. It's that game where you're playing a little crow who is a reaper, and you have to go and find errant souls and deliver them to their final end. I did a full episode about it when it came out, and it did make a big splash when it came out. A lot of people were very taken with this one, with good reason. And it runs perfectly on Switch, actually. I played the first couple of levels of it just to see how it was running. And, I mean, it says something for the game that having played through it once already this year, I actually immediately got sucked right back into it and remembered how much I liked it when it came out earlier this year. It runs perfectly, the frame rate is fine. I will say that the bird is quite small on the screen, on the handheld, but it doesn't matter. I think this is a good game for a Switch. It fits perfectly into the palm of your hand. So I think that Death's Door is perfectly good to play on the Switch, and I hope that any of you who missed out on it from not having an Xbox or whatever will take the chance to play that one. It's a really lovely game. A Short Hike also came to PlayStation, and I believe that this is basically the Switch version that came out earlier this year, which had some extra content. It had a speedboat that wasn't in the original Steam release, and it had a few extras here and there. And A Short Hike looks fantastic as well. I believe they've up-resed it so that it will run in 4K. It looked good on the big screen. It's a game that has a very distinct art style. It's isometric perspective, and it is polygonal characters and a polygonal landscape, but it has a pixelated effect on the graphics, so it looks like a pixel game, even though it's in 3D. And it's very charming because it gives it a retro feel, and a sort of innocent retro game feel that fits very well with the content of that game. It's a wonderful short game. I'm sure that lots of you know about it already. It won prizes when it first came out, and it made a splash on the Switch, I think partially because it's so cheap. I think it was £7 on the Switch for this game. And you can power through A Short Hike in a couple of hours, but the really good thing to do in A Short Hike is to take it slow. It's a game in which you play a young bird called Claire, who is spending summer with her Aunt May on a holiday island, the Hawk Peak Provincial Park, where there are campers, there are hiking trails, there are people hanging out, there are rangers, there are a couple of people that are just artists. There's an artist who's doing paintings and getting inspiration from Hawk Peak Provincial Park. There are climbers, there's a climbing club. There are some people training for a marathon. There are some people just chilling on the beach. And all of them are different animals, and they're all very, very charming. And A Short Hike to me is kind of the quintessential indie game that I've played over the last few years. It's wonderful. It's got such a lovely, warm holiday island feeling to it. You really do just set off on your journey from Aunt May's cabin, and the only aim you've got in the game is to find the peak of Hawk Peak to try and get phone signal to talk to your mum. But along the way, you meet all kinds of people. You have to collect golden feathers that allow you to climb higher. And Claire is like a tentative young teen who isn't very sure of herself, and she goes through a few small experiences, talking to different kinds of people, slowly getting powered up to climb up that mountain and take on that trail that she's a little intimidated by. And so the whole game is this little miniature journey, and it's just a joy. There is something about A Short Hike that is so well put together. I think the visuals, the way that it controls is just lovely. You can jump and glide. So if you jump from a high place, you can just glide and swirl through the air on your way back down the mountain. And there is just something around every corner. It's impeccably well designed as a game and just so well written. The whole thing really is just a complete package. So it's really nice that has come onto the PlayStation now. I tweeted out that any PlayStation players that had missed it on other formats should give it a try. And a friend of mine and a friend of the show, Curls Burgers, Curls spelled Kerls, took up that invitation to play A Short Hike, bought it, and then did a couple of videos of his playthrough of the game. And I watched them, and I had a really good time watching Curls Burgers play A Short Hike and get into it slowly and kind of feel that lovely vibe of Hawk Peak Provincial Park. And so if you fancy seeing someone play through this game, if you've perhaps played it already, or if you want to see a little bit of it before you buy it, I can recommend going and checking out the Curls Burgers videos. It's a YouTube channel. I'll put a link in the show notes. And the third port that came along in the last week was The Wild at Heart. This was a game that was recommended to me by Hopple, a patron of the show, and someone who's always on the show's Discord chatting about games. A really good guy. And I played that one on Xbox and had a lot of fun with it. It is on Game Pass, but it's a game that as I was playing through it on Xbox, I was thinking this is another game, much like A Short Hike and Death's Door. There is just a certain kind of game that feels like it would fit on Switch. Perhaps it's the Nintendo influence in these games, or perhaps it's the slightly childlike, colourful, cosy, wholesome game type of feeling. But The Wild at Heart has that in spades. It's a game that takes a little bit of influence from Zelda, a little bit of influence from Pikmin, unusually. You don't see many Pikmin-influenced games around. So in this game, you're a child who arrives in a magical forest, meets a strange cast of mythical beings and magical beings that live in this forest called the Green Shields. And they invite you to be a member of the Green Shields. They're the guardians of the forest. And something is wrong in the forest. There is something dark in the heart of the forest that is starting to pollute the ecosystem. And they need a hand to get through this and to figure out what's going on. And so you arrive and you run around the forest, you collect things, you are introduced to a species called the Spritelings. And these are creatures, they're like little sprites, little Pikmin-type sprites that grow in the forest. You collect seeds and you can hatch them. And you get a pack of these little guys that follow you around, much like Pikmin. And you can throw them at obstacles to break things down. You can use them to weigh down switches to solve puzzles. You can throw them onto hostile animals and they'll take them out for you. And you have to manage your herd of Spritelings. And it has a wonderful hand-drawn style and a lovely, cozy feel to it. It's a wonderful game to look at and to listen to. The music is great and the sound is great. It's just very charming, very well written. And I haven't actually done a full episode on The Wild at Heart. I played about half of that game and became distracted by something else, as I tend to do. But I would like to come back to it. I think it does deserve a whole episode, but I am happy to see that The Wild at Heart is now out on Switch. I did read on the Moonlight Kids, that's the name of the developers, Twitter, that they had struggled a little bit to make it run on Switch, because when you have 40 little spritelings that are all doing their own thing and responding to the action on screen, apparently it was a challenge to make that run smoothly as a small indie team. And I haven't been able to get far enough into the game to see if that affects things or not. But it's good that they are aware of it and they are working on that. So The Wild at Heart is a definite recommendation from me anyway, even if I can't speak to the Switch version too much right now. So those are 3 wonderful ports that have come to other consoles. Death's Door is going to be great on the Switch. A Short Hike on PlayStation. It's surprising that it wasn't there already, but I believe Adam Robinson Yu is a solo developer, and even though that game had so much hype, it's great to see it finally on the PlayStation. And The Wild at Heart, I hope it gets a second wind on the Switch. I feel like this game deserves to be talked about a little more than it has been so far. So there's 3 really fun games that have been ported onto new systems, and hopefully they all get new waves of appreciation from players who've been keeping their eye on them and waiting for them to arrive. It was also Black Friday this last Friday as I'm recording, which means huge sales on all of the eShops. So I was opportunistically just leafing through to see if there were any bargains I could pick up. And I got my eye on 3 different games, and I couldn't decide which one to buy. I thought I'll buy one to treat myself. And they are all games that have been mentioned in the Game of the Year conversation. And I'm always trying to keep on top of the games that people talk about in that level of quality, so I can at least have an opinion on them and be informed. But it's hard to make a Game of the Year list when you're just a player like me with a podcast, rather than being like IGN or something where you have all these people that have played literally everything. So you can't really keep on top of all the AAA releases. There's just not enough hours in the day. But these 3 games were Hitman 3, Life is Strange True Colors, and Guardians of the Galaxy, and they're all games that I've been curious about to different degrees. Like, I love Life is Strange, the first game, and I've covered it on this show, and I am curious to play True Colors. Hitman is not really my thing, but people love it so much that I kind of want to get that, to catch that enthusiasm and see what they're all about. And Guardians of the Galaxy has just had such a great critical response. I think everyone is surprised by how well received this game has been. And so I was kind of going back and forward between them and chatting on the Discord, the show's Discord, which one should I get? And what really tilted me was I was listening to So Video Games podcast, and Carlos and Brad were the hosts of that show, were very enthusiastic about Guardians of the Galaxy. And I think that one has possibly had the most enthusiasm from players. People have been really impressed by that one, so I took the plunge and bought it. First impressions, I'm very glad that I did. It's really cool, it's really colourful, it's really fun. It's a third-person action-adventure, a big AAA title. It has great graphics, it looks really next-gen. It has a great colourful palette. And Guardians of the Galaxy, I'm not really familiar with the franchise, in inverted commas, but so I haven't seen the movies or anything, but I do love a game like that sometimes, just a AAA great game that looks great, that plays great, and is just spectacular with loads of set pieces. And so I'm very happy with that purchase. I'm looking forward to playing through the rest of the game. I love that you can scan the environment a little bit like in Metroid Prime. The combat feels good. You can use these kind of team skills. So you have these 3 different superheroes that are part of your gang, and you can summon their abilities with a cooldown time. So the combat seems like there's room for some complexity and strategy. And the first level is just really spectacular. It's so eye-poppingly colourful, and there's really good chemistry between the team. One of the things that caught my eye about it was I love when NPCs interact with each other regardless of you being there. So you feel like this world has just got a life of its own. I've talked about this on the podcast before, but I'm a big fan of a world that feels vibrant and alive, and not like it's just there for you, but that it's always going on when you look away. It gives it an extra layer of believability and immersion. And the characters in this game are always chatting to each other and teasing each other, talking to each other. It feels like there's a lot going on around you, and you're just one member of a gang. And I love that. So first impressions of Guardian of the Galaxy are good. and I'm looking forward to the rest of my playthrough. But the main game I'm going to talk about today is Chicory. This is an indie game that came out earlier this year. It's still flying high in the Metacritic ratings. It was very well received, and I was really curious about it at the time, but there was a lot going on, and so I didn't quite get to it. But I have now. I really enjoyed the game, and so that's going to be the featured game of this episode. But before I get on to talking about Chicory, I would like to mention that this show is patron-supported. I have a Patreon at patreon.com/gaminginthewild, where you can sign up for $1 a month or more if you want, and you'll be invited to the show's Discord to talk to me and to other people who listen to the show about what you're playing and what you're planning to play, sharing screenshots, sharing recommendations. There are occasional extra episodes, and I sometimes round up games from sales to let people know when there's a bargain that they can get, especially if it's something that's been covered on the show. It's a lovely community, and you are very welcome to come and join us. That's patreon.com/gaminginthewild. Thank you very much to my existing patrons, and thank you to you if that's something that you'd consider. And with that said, let's move on and talk about the featured game of the episode, Chicory. So Chicory is a game that came out earlier this year. It was developed by Greg Lobanov, the developer who made Wondersong, and it was published by Finji with fantastic music by Lena Rain. It came out on PlayStation 5 as a console exclusive, but it's also available on Mac and Windows. It's $20 and £16, and the developer of the game describes it thus. Chicory, a colourful tale. You're a dog wielding a magic paintbrush. Use the power of art to explore, solve puzzles, help your animal friends, and restore colour to the world in this top-down adventure game. And I describe it as a delightful, heartfelt, and lovingly crafted adventure set in the land of picnic that takes the 2D Zelda format and gives it a bright new lick of paint. This one was very well received. Metacritic has it at 90% from critics, which is universal acclaim. Players gave it 75%, which I found surprising. I did look through the player reviews to see what had prompted this lower score, but there aren't many, so this was people just dropping a rating on it. My best guess on why it has that lower score is that it came out at a time when there weren't many PlayStation 5 exclusives. And because this was a PlayStation console exclusive, I think perhaps this is PlayStation players who were thirsting for a next-gen game and ended up with something kind of cute and small scale that isn't exactly what they were looking for. But I would definitely err on the side of the critics with this one. It's a really good game. And How Long to Beat has it at 8.5 hours for the story, 13 hours for extras, and 21 hours for completionists. My playthrough took me 15 hours, but then I went back a little bit, so I think I'm probably getting on for 18 hours now, and there is more gameplay there for sure. I didn't complete the whole thing, but I've got all of the trophies apart from the kind of extreme completionist ones, which is like finding every collectible. And it is the kind of game that I think invites that kind of play, at least if you are as charmed by it as I was. So in Chicory, you play a young Snoopy-like dog character, and you get to name them at the start. The game will ask you, what is your favourite kind of food? I thought about it for a while and then said curry, and so it turned out that you're actually picking the name for your little character, and I was called Curry. And so I'm going to refer to the little dog character as Curry for the rest of the game, because my dog was called Curry, and that's stuck in my head now, and I think it's really cute. But I did note that Louis from Time Played 3HR, when asked what his favourite food was, said a bagel, apparently. So for the whole game, whenever anyone said anything to him, they would say, "Hi, a bagel." So he had this odd grammatic construction instead of a cute name. Reagan from the short game, I think, called his dog Pasta. It's pretty cute, you know. I think that most things that you would pick are going to turn out to be cute. All of the other characters in the game are also named after food. And yeah, you're in the realm of Picnic, the province of Picnic. This is a black and white world, line drawn, so it is literally black and white. There is no grayscale here. And in this world, there is someone called the Wielder, and the Wielder is a kind of a local celebrity, and also a little bit like an artist laureate, you could say, who wields a magic paintbrush, and it's their job to give colour to the world. And when their time is up, they will teach a new wielder, and they will hand down the brush. And so there have been generations and generations of wielders. You can see in the hallway in the building where you start off, which is the Wielder Tower, where the wielder lives, you can see portraits of all the previous wielders. It looks like there have been many different types of artists, many different types of personalities who have been the wielder over the years. And your character, Curry, is the cleaner for the current wielder, whose name is Chicory. And Curry is kind of a Chicory superfan. It seems that as you wander through Picnic, it seems like the wielder really is like a pop star of an individual. But Curry is the cleaner for Chicory, and on this particular day, you start off by learning how to sweep the floor, which is teaching you a mechanic that you're going to need. If you're on the PlayStation 5 controller, it has a touchpad that you can use to swipe your finger across it, and you can use the broom to sweep the whole room until it's shiny and clean. Or you can use the sticks to move it around. But what this really amounts to is that you're using a mouse pointer, kind of. It's that kind of control mechanism, which is something that worried me a little bit at the start of the game. It's never fun, really, to be using a pointer on a joypad. But this game does it very well, especially by using that touch panel. I can imagine that using a mouse, I don't know actually, I'm not sure what the control scheme is on PC and Mac. But anyway, it worked for me. And after you've swept that room up, you pop out to say hello to Chicory, but you find the brush, the magical brush that gives the world of Picnic colour, just lying on the floor. And so you pick it up, you knock on Chicory's bedroom door, and it turns out that Chicory is sick. Chicory is sad, Chicory is slumped under a blanket, and is kind of snappy and mean and down and doesn't want to hear about the brush. And so, being worried as you are, you run out into the world to try and get some advice about what to do with the brush, what to do about Chicory not being well. And there you are, a little dog in a big world with a quest, and the adventure begins. And so this is where the fun really begins in Chicory. You're set free in the world, you have the magic brush, it's a black and white world, and you can take the brush and add colour to it. But the catch is that it's a little bit like using Microsoft Paint, so you can't do anything particularly detailed, you can't do anything particularly good. All you can do really is kind of scroll with this slightly unwielding brush mechanism, colour across the world. It feels more like you're making a big old mess than actually thoughtfully colouring the world. But that's kind of in keeping with Curry's character. Curry just romps off through the world and starts to redecorate, starts to colour in trees, and you can scroll here and there. You might meet people that want their houses to be different colours. You'll meet people that you know who are like, Curry, what are you doing with the brush? Where's Chicory? And you have to go through the world, and Curry is not exactly sure why they have the brush, and is struggling a little bit with trying to do right by Chicory and to do the right thing. And that's kind of a theme with this game. It's about self-confidence and about trying to be a good person, trying to be a best version of yourself, dealing with doubt, dealing with other people. These are all themes that run through this game, despite the fact that it is a very cute game, and all of the characters that you meet are adorable. They're just flat out adorable, really well written, really funny, distinct characters with distinct personalities. These quite heavy themes do run through the game, and I think that gives it a little bit of emotional heft that I wasn't quite expecting. It is a very cute game, a very childlike game, but it does handle some pretty deep themes, actually, like more so than I was expecting. And I think it does so sensitively and interestingly. But this first part of the game is really fun. You just run out, you can find the local village, you can visit Curry's house, and off you go out into the world. And the way that the map is set up is very much like the old Zelda games, in that you'll reach pathways that are blocked by, say, rocks or by trees, and you know that you'll be able to come back and get through those places later, but that now is not the time yet because you haven't got the right ability. But there is an emergency in the country of Picnic. There is an infection that is spreading, these black trees that are very spooky and sinister. And it turns out that you as brush wielder are going to have to carry the can for Chicory a little bit. You're going to have to support your idol and carry out a little bit of work to try and get rid of these black trees. And as in the Great Zelda format, what this means is that you have to go to all the different corners of the map and you have to find the source of the infection and you have to cleanse it away. And this manifests in some really funny and interesting and quite surprising boss battles. It's largely a combat-free game, but there are boss battles in this game where you're going to have to use the brush to jab some big bad and to try and colour them away. And it breaks the game up really nicely, actually. And after each boss battle, you'll get an extra brush ability. So you'll be able to traverse the landscape in a new way or use your brush in a new way. And the game is really nicely paced so that you always feel like you're making progress. You always know where you're headed next. And even if you don't, it has this super lovely system where there are phone boxes everywhere. And you can call your mom. You can pick up the phone, call your mom, and she'll just loosely tell you what you're roughly supposed to be doing and where, just in case you've put the game down for a while or you've forgotten what you were doing. But there's also an ability to talk to your dad. And your mum will say at the end of the call, she'll say, well, you know, your dad does tend to over-explain a lot, but I can put him on if you want. And you can select yes or no. And if you talk to your dad, he'll literally run down exactly where you are. For example, if you're stuck in a puzzle, he'll say, oh, well, what you really need to do here is, I mean, if I were you, I would take the brush and I would use it to light that lantern, and then I would paint a line between A and B, and he'll just give you a solution for a puzzle. So it's a very gentle game in that way, in that it's always easing you along on the right path through map design. But if you do get stuck, there are phone boxes everywhere where you can just get a hint. And if you're really stuck, you can get your puzzle solution told to you by your dad. And I thought that was quite a graceful system, actually, because, you know, we get stuck in games and it's not the most fun thing in the world, especially if you've really just run aground and you're not seeing the solution to a puzzle. And we've all had to go online and look up a solution. No one likes doing it. This game has recognized that is not fun. And because there are puzzles in the game, it's got a built-in hint system that will give you a first hint. And then it's also got solutions. So you don't have to go and Google the solution. Chicory, the game, wants you to enjoy the game, wants you to progress through the game. And so it serves that up to you in a really nice way. And as you get more brush abilities, your ability to colour the landscape grows. So those initial scrawls that you make, it gets a lot easier. When you get like a fill ability, you can fill the ground in a space, you can fill the trees with a certain colour, and so you can start to colour in the landscape more quickly. And this is really satisfying. Like every time you run into a new screen, it starts off black and white. You can fill in the ground, you can fill in the cliffs, and then suddenly it's just alive with colour. Very bright colours. So you're running around taking this black and white world, filling it up with colour, using the brush to solve puzzles such as dabbing a plant that will grow into a bridge, or removing colour from something to make it grow in a different way. And the game really progresses very nicely. It really clips along. You're always getting a new ability that helps you to solve puzzles in a new way. You're always getting a new ability that will open up the map. You're finding costumes for Curry. So you'll find different t-shirts and hats and sunglasses in chests. You'll find brush styles, which are, you know, like in Photoshop, it's different ways to use the brush, like to get an ombre, to mix colours up, to get a stamp that you can use to fill a landscape and make a screen really fun. So it's like an MS Paint game mixed with a Zelda game, mixed with something that has the atmosphere of a short hike. And it pulls those things together in such a nice way. I think this game is very well finished. It feels very slick. I didn't encounter a single bug or crash in my whole time with the game. Everything feels crisp and well considered. The dialogue is well done. There are loads of lovely touches. There's loads of little side quests. There are loads of memorable characters. The whole thing feels just very ingenious and very well put together. I think that they've really done a great job with this game. And I have to say that when you combine that with the thematic material and the story material, this is a game that punches above its weight. It's somehow more than the sum of its parts. There are a lot of cute indie games out there, but I really think that this one is at the very, very top tier of that. I think the critics' reviews in this case are spot on. This is quite a special little game, and I really encourage people to give it a try. And one of my favourite things about this one, I'll finish off just by giving you a little bit of the charm of this game. Everyone that you meet has a name that is named after food. They're all named after food, and they're all different animals that you'll meet. I remember meeting a traveller cat called Shard, like a shard lettuce, who's basking, sleeping really, when they're supposed to be climbing over a landslide to go and find their sister. They're a really funny little character. There is an art dealer cat called Marzipan, and as the wielder, everyone is judging your art. Everyone's interested in your art. There are people who are very critical of Curry's naive style, and there are other people that think it's just wonderful. And so Curry will end up being part of this conversation about whether Curry is good enough to be the wielder. And we'll have doubts about that as well. There's also a zebra called Broccoli, a really worried zebra, really, really funny character. There was a lion called Cardamom with a big fuzzy mane, a previous wielder, and an owl called Miso. And honestly, every time that you meet a new character, they're so charming. I really wanted to exhaust all of the dialogue options and find out what they had to say. They were just lovely. And the central theme of Curry's optimism and whether anyone can lift the brush or whether it has to be someone special is a really interesting conversation about whether you have to be a genius to make good art or whether you can just give yourself to it, and through your enthusiasm and through the application of effort and kindness and personality, you can still have an impact. And so there's a nice kind of egalitarian message to the whole thing as well. The idea of anyone being able to do their part when called upon, and what that entails. It's really interesting. I think there's some good solid questions at the heart of this game. And so for such a cute game, for such a little lovely, wholesome game, there's hidden depths to Chicory. There is more to it than meets the eye. And it really is a pleasure just going through this game and experiencing this world. And it's just really lovely how the map opens up, how you'll eventually get to go to places that you've seen throughout the game and never been able to get to. And by the end, the whole map really opens up. The side quests are really fun too. There's so much to do. You'll be given letters to deliver to people with just hints of where they live. And you'll sometimes come to shops where people will just ask you to design a new logo for the shop. Or you'll find a donut shop where they ask you to design a new colourful donut for people. And people just pin tasks on the wielder. They do ask the wielder to do just anything they need doing. But it's hard for little Curry, but it's really fun as the player to just do all of that stuff. And you can just race through this game, but it is a rare game that I came back to after I hit the credits. Because I wanted to spend more time in this world, and I really wanted to just polish off a few things that I hadn't done yet. And one of my big feelings about Breath of the Wild, which is a real favourite game of mine, was that after the game, I felt so sad that there wasn't any post-game dialogue and post-game game. Like, I felt like ending the game after the big battle was a little bit sad because the world deserved more. And in Chicory, they do that. So after you've finished the main quest of the game, you can go out into the world and talk to people, and they have new dialogue for you, and there are, like, invariably there will be side quests that you didn't do yet, and so you can kind of do a last walk around Picnic, the province of Picnic, and talk to people a little bit more, and the game really eases you out as well. It's so welcoming and so lovely. It's a game that, it did get one Game Awards nomination, but it was in the Games for Impact category, I guess because it deals with mental illness to some degree. But I would have loved to see it in the Best Indie Game category. I don't think it was there. I mean, 12 Minutes was in there, which is still blowing my mind, because that game is just so problematic and awful. I would much rather have seen Chicory there. It's one of the best games I've played this year, without question. That's Chicory. So that was Chicory. I hope you enjoyed hearing about it. This is a game that I can't recommend strongly enough. I hope that I've gotten across to you that this one is something quite special. I had a really good time with it, and I've got a feeling it will be making an appearance in some of those Game of the Year shows that I've got planned. And there is some fun stuff coming up in December. I'm hoping to have back some guests and friends of the show to talk about their games of the year. And there are a couple more games that I want to finish off before the year is out, so do stick with me for that. If you would like to tell me what you thought of Chicory, what your games of the year are, what you think I should definitely play before the end of the year, then find me on social media as Gaming in the Wild, especially on Twitter. You're also welcome to come and join that Patreon if you enjoyed the show. It's patreon.com/gaminginthewild if you'd like to become a supporter. So thanks very much for listening. I'll be back next week with another episode. Take care of yourselves and each other, and bye-bye for now.